interesting evening. Over to our speakers now.
Am I on mute?
Hi everyone, welcome. It's really nice to be welcomed in so many different languages. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm just going to start by just sharing my screen. So just bear with me for just one minute, and then we shall introduce what we're going to do today. So today is really about hearing from our voices from our students and our educators, and really understanding what has been challenging, what are the challenges we're facing with learning at home, and what are some of the learnings we're having about what might work. And so I wanted to just start with this headline. I saw it in the news the other day. We're living through one of the biggest shifts in society in recent history. Our education system, how teaching and learning happens, is changing so quickly. And we're experiencing this very personally. We're experiencing this as educators, some of us as students, some of us, myself included, as a parent. And I'd love for you to just chat in really quickly, like when you see this headline, like how do you feel when you read it? How do you feel when you read this? Apprehensive, nervous, sad, anxious, hopeful, motivated, disappointed. So many emotions, right? Excited and terrified. I've been using those two together all day for different reasons, but I definitely acknowledge those. Anxious, concerned, nervous. So the world is changing. The challenge that we are navigating together is difficult. It's not just difficult in India, it's difficult the world over. I also feel like there is a huge opportunity for us to reimagine how teaching and learning happens, reimagine potentially the purpose of education itself, to make education more accessible to students, to enable it to be an education that is driven by our students, learner driven for our children. And my hope is today that you leave this webinar feeling a little less nervous and anxious and worried, and a lot more hopeful and optimistic about the possibility that some of these changes, while scary right now, some of these changes offer us. So a big part of today is to hear from our children and from educators. And it's really a chance for us to deepen and challenge our understanding of what is and isn't working for our students, from hearing from them directly of how they're really experiencing learning at home. In the second part of the webinar, Amalia and I will just share some of our learnings from our work at Teach for India over the past 2 months. Like everyone, we're still navigating the challenges. We're still feeling like seeing a lot of struggles and finding every time we move a little step forward, we're finding more struggles and more challenges. But we're also excited to share some of our learnings and insights that we hope will help as you also navigate some of these challenges. I'm going to ask Amalia to take us through the next piece.
Good evening, everyone. So as educators, when we start this period of teaching from home, just many tough choices that we see ourselves having to make as educators. Just which of the two do I focus on? We find ourselves in the middle of a spectrum with so many choices. And the first is just ensuring student learning. Do I focus on my students' learning, or do I focus on student well-being? Right? And for the next 4 choices, what we're going to do is I'd like for you to chat in which one you would lean towards right now and why. So which one would I lean towards at this moment, and why would I lean towards that one? Student learning or student well-being? All right, I can see well-being. Would love for you to also give us a reason as to why. I can see a lot of student well-being. Hafsa says 30/70. All right, so I can see a lot of student well-being to therefore engage better student engagement because it's a pandemic. Something that we're learning over time is how can we look at student well-being through student learning. So how may we enable students and how may we take care of our students through student learning as well and look at learning as a method to enable that. So that's one that we find ourselves having to navigate through both. Both being balanced is something I see. Let's move forward. Yeah, the next one we see ourselves, no problem, Emma, having to choose between is saying, do we provide structured learning, right? Do we plan everything as to when our students do what in a day to give them that predictability, or do we actually just enable flexible learning, give our students choices to choose when they do what? Which one of the two would we lean towards and why? Structure or flexibility? I'm seeing numbers being chosen, flexible learning. Would love for you to also write down why. I can see some of the students sharing as well. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Right, I'm actually seeing a dichotomy, and I think that's what's the most interesting here, saying that there's no one right answer, but it's just about our experiences that have made us choose which one. What we're learning is it's really helpful to provide some amount of structure, given that students at this point of time need predictability, they need some form of certainty, but at the same time, how do we make sure that we're actually enabling the space for flexibility and asking our students what their days are looking like before we create structures for them and kind of co-creating it together. Let's move forward. All right, next one, a big question we've just been struggling between is saying, do we actually gain parent support at this point of time and work closely with them for student learning? Or do we acknowledge that they are really busy and going through a lot right now, and so give work to students that they can do completely independent of parents? I see Mansi's already responded. Would love to hear from more with parent support. This is really interesting. I'm seeing a big range at the moment. Would love for you to also share the reason. So I'm seeing someone share about depending on the age, and that's a very valid point. For secondary, I'd make it independent, but for primary, for elementary students, we do parent support. All right. Range of choices here. Let's move to the last one. And lastly, just do we provide different material to cater to different levels of students right now, given that they may have differentiated needs, or do we actually provide the same material, saying let material be a form of unity at this point of time? Which one would we lean towards? I'm seeing different material. I'm seeing 50-50, a lot of different material, but some same material. Great. I think what's really interesting about what you've just seen is that with the same set of choices, every single educator on this call has a different opinion, right? And the purpose of doing this was not to say, this is the correct answer. There is no correct answer at this point of time, but the purpose was for us to understand that all of us at this point of time are faced with a number of dilemmas that we have to choose between. And what's important at this point of time is for us to constantly go back to these and look at, hey, what did I learn? Do I want to refine or change where I am on the spectrum? I think I've constantly changed over the past few months based on where I am. And that's the beauty of it, is to say, what are we learning? Therefore, what are we changing? And just with that, I'll be handing it over to Emma. We'll be actually going over a student panel right now and come back to these choices after to see if anything of what we've put down shifts. Yeah. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Malia. So we've been thinking about what are the choices we're making as educators, and what we're going to start with today is just by hearing from our students and really understanding from children, how are they experiencing learning at home, and does as we listen and we take notes on what our children are saying, we're going to come back and we're going to think about, like, is anything shifting in the choices that we're making? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to move to welcome our students. We actually have a number of students with us today, which I'm really excited about. So we have Rehan, we have Jyoti, we have Abdus Samad, we have Alia, and we have another Rehan. So we have a lot of students to hear from today. So I'm going to invite them to put on their videos if possible, and if not, we'll just hear from you. So I'm going to start with Jyoti, and Jyoti, I'd love you to just start by sharing a moment that's going to stay with you over the past few months that we've been in lockdown. What's a moment that's going to stay with you?
Hi, so excited.
We're so excited, Jyoti.
Yeah, I think this lockdown has been actually really difficult for me because I'm a kind of person who would love to work and would do everything on time. But as now there are not people I'm meeting, there's lack of motivation, I think, because lack of interaction. So I think I'm not enough motivated to do my work right now because I'm not seeing my teachers every day. I'm not seeing my friends every day. So I think that is one of the challenges that I faced a lot, and I'm still facing. I'm still thinking that my exams are very near. How am I going to do? Because again, my teachers are not there. How I'm going to prepare? So it has been actually really difficult for me personally to stay in this lockdown and to study from online webinars, Zoom, Teams, and all that.
And
So
hearing
personally,
you,
it is actually been really difficult.
and hearing you
Hello?
miss people a lot, no, Jyoti? You're really missing people. And I think whenever I talk to students, I hear this
Hello,
is
Didi.
the first thing that students say to me. Alia, would you like to add? Do you want to share something?
So the thing which will remain with me for the lifetime, I think the class with Soumya Bhaiya. So we wrote our own poems, which was on our 7 stages of life, and which was for me it was unbelievable because it was virtual classes, and as we know, we have lot of background issues from our homes for the internet issues and different types of issues we have, but still in 5 days we made our book of many different poems, and each and every student contributed and gave their 100%, which will be my favorite movement ever, and which will remain with me forever. And the poems which we wrote and shared with everyone at our homes and school, that was the best moment for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia, for sharing that. And Rehan, I saw your icon pop up. Would you like to share like a moment that's going to stay with you from the past few months that we've been in lockdown?
Yeah. Hello everyone. My name is Rehan. I am from Ahmedabad. So the moment which will remain with me is like it was locked down, and when it started, lot of people was not knowing that something like this will be happening. And I live in a community which is basically a slum, and at that people were not prepared. People were having normal life what they used to have earlier. And when people uh, got to know that this is going to happen, there is lockdown and this all of the thing, and then after at certain time people was not having food, and there were a lot of crisis happening. And at that time when I was seeing people faces and people homes, and basically people what they are doing, and when I used to see children crying for food, at that time I basically realized that what is the meaning of food actually. Because we talk a lot of times that food is very important, but this was a time when I realized that what is the real meaning of food actually. Because it's give you an example, it's like an example that is existing right now. And this is one of the things which I will be never forgetting. And second thing, when I was at that time, I was like, what to do. And I used to think so much that what can I do for them? And then at some time, I used to thought that I'm a kid, what can I do? But at some time, I used to think I'm a kid, but I can do a lot. And then suddenly, I we contacted some NGOs and we started distributing rations in the community. And then we used to see people are so happy and they are just picking up those and grabbing and just going and they are cooking. And when I used to see children not crying and they are happy, I was just having another level of feeling. So at that time, the certain kind of feeling you get, no, you'll never forget. So this is something I'll never forget in my life also.
And thank you for sharing both of those like moments. Yeah, thank you for that. And Abdus Samad, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what's been one of your favorite lessons or activities that you've done since you've been at home. I think Alia got us started thinking about that. What's something you've been doing at home learning that you've really enjoyed?
So basically, in this lockdown, I have done a lot of things. I just spoke on a radio. I never thought that I'll speak on a radio. So I was just speaking, and we were doing certain kind of project on a mountain, garbage mountain right now. So I'll be a little quick. Where I live, there is a big mountain called Piranha Mountain, and it is whole trash. And there are 7 mountains. So it has been already a year. We are just trying to stop the mountain garbage. Like actually, garbage should be not coming over there because community is being very affected. So we are trying from a long time for that. So we were doing online RTIs. So me and my friends, we all were doing learning online RTI to basically gather information uh, to file RTI on this, and then we can do something else actually. And this was something I liked. And when I basically speak on a radio in Gujarat, and I was live in India, I think. So that was very that was I never thought about that I will be speaking in a radio. And third thing, like when I used to distribute ration at the first trip, when I distributed 70 kids grocery, I was like, okay, this would be enough for someday. But after again the situation was created, and then again we started uh, distributing. But at that time we thought that the kit we were making was very small, and then we increased it, and then we were distributing it. So I was feeling very proud of myself that I was able to help people. And for that also, I was involved with Teach for All. I just share my story with them. I was part of a webinar. So this all activities which I have done, I was like, this is some activities I loved during lockdowns. And the
It's
special
really interesting, Rehan, to hear how you're defining learning. It's really interesting to hear like the breadth of which you're defining learning. It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Abdus Samad, would you like to share as well?
Yeah. Yeah, ma'am. In this lockdown, I've done lots of things for my friends and the poor people. I help the poor people, and I'm seeing that in this lockdown, they don't have money to go their homes. And in the railway tracks, 16 people were killed also by the train. So I feel very sad that in this lockdown they don't have money. How can I help them? So every Sunday I make things and send them in the market, and I get money. And any uh, any amount of money I get, I distribute it to the poor people. And or if I don't have money, I would tell to my mother or father to make food and give them to the poor people. And who is the poor people not able to go to the village, I give them money. I ask my father or mother, they give me money, and I go and share the money with them. So they are also very happy with me. They say for me that you are very nice student, you are very helpful. And I have done these many things, I feel very nice and very proud of myself that I got my these nice mother and father.
Thank you for sharing as
Maybe I
well.
would like to also share.
Please, Alia, please.
So this the last week, when I got to know ki my friends who lived with me for a long time, now they don't have food to eat. Some of them also don't have shelter. The place where they live is a slum area. I visited there. So when I came back, I just reflected upon my upon the things which I saw, which really made me feel empathetic towards them. So I thought I should share this with my parents and my family members, but I was not that comfortable. But still, I tried and shared with them. So we all together provided food for them and asked them to feel free to ask us for anything they needed.
Thank you for sharing, Alia. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna move on and think a little bit more about learning. And I'd love to hear maybe Rehan from Delhi, if you can just share a little bit about who or what is helping you to learn from home. Like what is really enabling you to learn from home? Okay, while we wait for Rehan, I'll put the same question to Jyoti. So Jyoti, do you want to just share a little bit about who or what is helping you to learn from home?
Yeah, ma'am. I thank you so much. Yeah, ma'am. In the school, the friends will that attitude. They don't help each other regularly. But in the home, my mother, father, sister help me very nicely, and our online class is very good. But little disturbance in the mobile studying in the mobile because the brightness and all the volume from the outside distracts a lot of. But this school is the best for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jyoti, do you want to add? Okay, while we wait for different students to come back, I think like Rehan, if you're there, maybe you could just share a little bit about what you think teachers should prioritize for students to learn at home. What is it that teachers should be thinking about students learning at home?
Sorry, can you repeat? Your voice is actually breaking down.
What should teachers prioritize for students to learn at home?
Hello, Deep. Hello.
Yes, hello, Rehan.
Yes.
You can also answer. Please do that. Like, what is it that you think teachers should prioritize for students to learn at home?
TFI teachers helps us in everything. Like nowadays, we have not stationery as opening. So the TFI teacher helps us and motivate us to work at the single page have uh, that have not working on it. So the structure they were sending a system for learning like Zoom, Google Classes, Khan Academy, and structures that are giving daily lessons to us, YouTube links, and WhatsApp sharing, DOE content. The TFI teachers helps us in everything, and the biggest thing that is I love because of TFI. They help in any time and anywhere. My parents helps me in everything and motivate me for growth. Uh, my mother is very precious for me. She helps me in everything, and my father is like I need something for work or learn. So he helps me in everything. The relative also is there involved.
It's really
Okay.
shifted. The importance of like our families at this time has become really important to all of us, I think. No, thank you for sharing that. And so I'm going to close with one last question for students, and then we're going to move on to hear from
Connection
some of our
lost.
educators.
Connection नहीं आता.
So we're going to move on to hear from some of our educators as well. But the last question I'd like to pose to some of the students is, and maybe Jyoti, you can start, is just to understand like how do you think, what's your role in helping other children to learn or other students to learn? What's the role you play in helping other children to learn?
Hi, I hope I'm audible now.
You are, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Emma, Didi, can you just repeat your question because my connection is not
Of
breaking
course.
constantly. Yeah.
No, of course.
I'm so sorry.
No, please don't apologize. Can you just share what you see, how you see your role as helping other children to learn or other students to learn?
I think this is the current, looking at this current situation, it is really important for all of us to stay together. And when I saw myself and I saw many of my friends like breaking down and not having good times in academics as well as in families, so I felt like arts is something that can hold us all together. So we are at Gurukul currently conducting workshops which is helping everyone to just stay calm, focused and relaxed, because this is the time where many of us are breaking and not are together. So I feel like the art has that power to hold everyone together. So we have started this virtual workshop where we are taking story writing, music, quilling workshops for students, and currently we're going to take a workshop on superpower, finding your own superpower, career counselings. So that's all what we have been doing. Yeah, and I think something which will help all of us to learn, currently teaching life skills to kids, because we all are under this lockdown, and whatever I think we have learned in school, I don't know if I'm able to see that really coming alive. This is the point of time where we need to teach our children more empathy, compassion and love. So I think if that comes alive through things that we are learning in our school, teachers should teach maybe more how to be more compassionate, how to be more empathetic, and just show more love towards our own self and to others who are around us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. And I'd love to open that question to any of the other students who'd like to share for the next 2-3 minutes, and we just share some last thoughts.
I want to learn online that my Didi, my PSI teacher, made a summer camp group. In the summer camp group, she said, what do you want online summer camp or not? So I tell yes, and she tells that what do you learn, what do you want to learn in the online? So I tell about the space, World War, and about music, uh, currency, business. I tell these types of things. Then my Didi make the group also, and after this call, I have get another meeting to my Didi about that online summer camp group.
Thank you for sharing. What really stood out is that you said my teacher asked what I wanted to learn. Really powerful to hear. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move now to hear from some of our educators, and we have a number of people with us again. So we have Mantra with us, Meghna with us, Nikhil with us, and they are currently Teach for India fellows. They work in elementary, middle school, and high school classrooms, so very different contexts. And we also have Soumya from I Teach Schools, a school leader perspective to offer to some of the questions that we're thinking about. So I'm going to start by asking Meghna to just share like a little bit about what and how you are prioritizing for your elementary students to learn at home.
Thank you, Emma, and hello, everyone. So I think something that I'm prioritizing at the moment would definitely be socio-emotional well-being for my students, and I basically prioritize my students' physical and emotional security during this time. And I just want them to understand what is happening around them, to just make sense of the situation. And what I'm presently doing is just like helping them with simple coping strategies so that they can express their thoughts, questions, and feelings better. So that is definitely a priority for me.
Thank you for that. And Nikhil, you work with older students, 9th and 10th grade. Do you want to share a little bit about how you're thinking about how you're prioritizing what and how you're prioritizing their learning?
Sure, Emma. Uh, I truly resonate with what Meghna said because, these are unprecedented times. And during COVID, it is very important to take care of the social and mental well-being of our kids. That is more important. I know we are delivering content by giving and imparting education, but at this point of time, if we can provide them a social emotional touch and by giving them assurance that everything will be all right, will go a long way. So since I am teaching secondary grades 9th and 10th, it is also important for me to consider the academic content. So I have been doing a lot of kind of, you can say, innovation, a lot of new things over the time, because these 2 months, with the support of Teach for India and my PM, I had the liberty to like innovate few things. Started with the Zoom calls. There were some security issues in the Zoom call. Later, I transitioned into Google Classroom. So currently, I'm using Google Classroom as the LMS, learning management system, and WhatsApp for establishing communication with my kids. So apart from that, at the ground level, we are distributing rations to our kids who does not have rations in their families. Uh, I know it's a big task. TFI is also doing that, but we as a school team combined our money as well, and we have asked some donors as well to provide us money, and we went to the area because we teach in an area in the northwest Delhi of Jahangirpuri, and it's a red zone. It's a hotspot zone where nothing is allowed. So our fellows, like our co-fellows, are going and delivering rations and kits to them, giving assurances. So they have been doing rounds every week and providing as much as we can. And also we are involving parents as well. Parents, we can take parents as a partner, because their role is, I will say, it's I was able to reach out to many kids using the parents involvement. I did over 2 weeks of virtual parent teacher meeting with them. So I spent hours in assuring and checking their well-being, their health, their family, if they need anything, because TFI is doing a very good work in providing relief to them in whatever ways, by organizing different sessions, by reaching out to them. So it is our duty to support them as well. And also we help our kids who just passed out, like who just crossed their 10th, and they are waiting for their board results. So we reach them out, and we also take care of their mental and social well-being. So these are the few areas that we are working on at this point of time. Thank you. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. And Soumya, do you want to just share some perspective there? I know that I teach, you've taken an approach of like really thinking about it, like the learning that your students are going to have, and making sure that you're really enabling like high levels of learning, high levels of engagement. Do you want to just share a little bit about your journey with doing that?
Sure. Thanks, Emma. I think Nikhil has actually shared a bunch of the stuff that we've been doing as well. I think the only thing that I probably have to add is we're doing 4 hours of live classes every day and 2 hours of homework or self-learning packets. What we've kind of landed on is that I think even in regular times, our students need a lot of socio-emotional learning, as well as taking care of mental and physical well-being. Of course, it's needed much more right now, but our approach has always been one of integration. So we're not keen to say, let's not do acads right now or switch over to something else, but it has to be integrated. So if you're doing an English lesson, that's where you got to figure out how to build in the socio-emotional learning as well. I think that's the only kind of slightly different thing that I might add there. We've been able to reach out, I think, to about 85% students or so who've had devices and so on. So they've been able to attend classes consistently. Some of them have been dropping in and out just based on availability of devices. And we're working on trying to solve that in parallel while classes are happening. We've also honestly found the virtual world to be superior to the in-person world in many ways. Yeah. Just one being the kind of feedback that you can collect and give students on their work through Google Classroom, for example, is far superior than what you can do with notebooks or even as one teacher in class of 40, 45 students. So we're actually feeling quite hopeful about driving just mastery and just joyful experiences, but also build mastery at the same time in virtual classes. And that poem stuff that Alia was talking about earlier is just one example of trying to say that, you know what, you create the same level of excellence even if you're at home, maybe even better.
Thank you, Samir. I think that lens shift of like, how do we use, what can be done even better over using online platforms or other platforms, what can be done better at home is a really powerful lens for us to keep in our minds as we're navigating some of these challenges, right?
Yeah, and I want to add another, just if you have another 30 seconds. I mean, one is of course the kind of feedback that you can collect and give is far more powerful if you use a system like Google Classroom. Even the individualized support that you can give is far better. Student collaboration actually can also be far better just because of there not being physical limitations anymore. You can bring in so much external perspective because it's just about calling somebody to a Zoom call and that's it, right? It's so simple to get guest speakers and stuff. And lastly, I think it just becomes so much better for students to work on projects and stuff because now they have access to all the real world tools that we use, right? Whether you Google something, whether you draw graphs of something, whether you watch a useful video, all of that is now available right there. Versus in class, typically, they don't have all of that. And so the teacher becomes the sole source of information, whereas here it's not that. And so I think there's just a lot of advantages of going virtual that should carry on even after the in-person schools resume, whenever that happens.
I mean, I do think there are some shifts that are coming in the way that learning is happening, and that, like as you said, are superior and would help us to accelerate student learning in the long run, like far beyond like what happens in terms of whether classrooms come back together or not in the same way then. So thank you so much for surfacing that for us. And Mantra, we haven't heard yet from you. I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit about maybe a couple of the biggest challenges that you've faced and how have you begun to approach those challenges?
Yeah, thank you. So the biggest challenge is reaching out to all the students, because not everyone has access to virtual learning platforms like WhatsApp or just even a smart mobile phone, right? For them to access as small as a YouTube video, right? So that has been the biggest challenge so far. In my class of 64 kids, I've been able to reach out only to 30 of them using the WhatsApp as a major platform and sending YouTube videos and other sources, right? So that has been the biggest challenge. And the different methods that I've tried is using parents as one of the most important facilitators, because I call them up and I tell them things like, I understand you don't have WhatsApp, but what can we do to make sure that some amount of learning is happening on everyday basis? So I mean, I'm still figuring it out. We've been talking about sending them worksheet packages via the same ration shops that we have been sending them food packages, right? That is like just as an ongoing talk. But what surprised me was recently I got a call from one of the parents who said, I ensure that my kid reads the newspaper every day, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. I make sure at least he reads the newspaper out loud. So I think that kind of gave me a hope that parents are like very important at this point, and with or without an virtual platform, they can still do wonders. All we need to do is somehow make sure that we are, in loop with them. So that's been the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And Meghna, I know you've been doing a lot of work with parents, like my own son is 4, right? So I know like how important that relationship between the school and the parent is very personally, right? And I also know how challenging that is to be the parent on the other side of receiving this information. So I'd love to hear, Meghna, from some of your experience of what have you learned from really like working with parents, especially for working with elementary children.
Definitely, Emma. And I think I'd begin with something that this pandemic has taught me. It's taught me to look at parents from an entirely different lens. Like we've always looked at parents as caregivers, but right now parents are the superheroes. And I think a lot of learning is only happening because of the parents. This is what I've learned. Every moment in a child's life offers a great opportunity to teach them important emotional skills, important intelligence skills, and simple skills like caring, listening, empathy, problem solving. And I think that's where parents come as almost superheroes. And how do we teach them and how do we bring them into this circle of learning? How do we tell them that, hey, we really need your support right now, and you're the only ones who can make learning possible for our students now that they're away from schools? And that is definitely challenging because a parent who, like parents from our communities, parents of our children, generally have like a notion that probably I'm not fit for this and I'm not a teacher, I don't know much about it. But just that is where the shift in the lens has to happen. So as fellows and as an individual, I've tried to reach out to a lot of parents. I've spoken to them on calls. And I've also worked with an external organization called Miraki, which looks at how parents can be almost mark their shucks like the light for their students. And just simple activities involving parents in simple activities like taking daily life examples. So if my mother is cooking roti, can I divide that roti into 5 different pieces and teach my child the concept of fraction? So something that I really want the parent to do is just tell the student that, hey, the roti is a whole, and if I divide it into 5 different parts, I'm going to teach you what fractions or bhag is going to look like. And just taking feedback from parents that, hey, how about a simple activity like this at home? How do you think is it going to make a difference? Definitely the students going to learn so much more if you explain them through these simple activities. And also this really helps in building a lot of skills. So a lot of emotional skills, relationship building between the parent and the child happens. And I've seen for my own kids, elementary students really need that support at that time. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of confusion around what the pandemic is. They're hearing so much, they're so anxious, they've heard anxious conversations, but they really don't know how to approach it. And I think that's where parents come in just as, support, like as supporters, somebody who cares and also loves and also helps them learn at the same time. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pause there. And I think we've heard a lot. I think that's certainly helped me to think about how we might approach this crisis as an opportunity to like reimagine learning. And it's given me a lot of thoughts around like what might be some of those things that are really important to focus on. What I'd love to do now is just to pause to invite you to go back to some of those 4 choices that we shared at the start, and just to think about, has anything shifted in the choices that you made? So has anything shifted as you've heard from our students and as you've heard from our fellows? And then I'm just going to open it up for 5 minutes to just hear a couple of questions from the audience to the panel directly. Okay, so I'm just going to open it up. If anyone has any questions, either to students or to the educators that you've heard, we've got time for a couple of questions, and obviously we'll have questions, some space for questions at the end as well. Thank you. Yeah, I think something that seems to be coming up seems to be around like creating engaging content isn't so much of the issue as it is motivating students to engage with that content. And so how do we really enable children to do the work and activities that we send is something that I'm hearing come up. Would any of you like to share like your thoughts on that?
Hi, Emma. I would like to answer this.
Please.
Yeah, so this one is something that was in my mind as well. Initially, when I started teaching, when I saw no responses or not much response. But later, what I realized is asking the students and co-creating with them actually helps a lot. Because once I sent out Google Forms to them and then asked them to like, or even just a group chat with them, asking them, what do you want to learn? Like my student Abdul Samad here shared that he wants to learn about space, World War. That kind of shocked me because that's not something that I expected from my 7th grade kid, right? I want to learn about the World War, I want to learn about the space. I want to learn how to do research. So these are things that shocked me, and that gave me a very deep perspective that kids actually know a lot, and they are the important, they are the center of all of this, right? So I think who better to ask? Like what worked for me was co-creating with them. Once I started co-creating with them and started sending out content in relation to what they wanted to learn, I think that worked out. There's a number of people who started responding, started increasing by the day. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Other questions that people might have?
Emma, may I go?
Please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think somebody has also asked like how to reach all the children since children do not have access to smartphones. Yeah, I experiencing the same issue because I teach in the Jahangirpuri area where 60% of the student does not have smartphones in our area. And sometimes they do have, but at very rare occasion. So what we are doing during those times is we have created student leaders, and we are building called COPs, which is called communities of practices. Okay, so what they do is student leaders call those students which do not have access to phones, and they explain few content over the phone or through SMS. And if they face any problem, they get back to me. Also, we tried contacting the local stationery shops near the Jahangirpuri area, and so that they can distribute some material to the students who cannot access phone. But since Jahangirpuri was a hot zone area, they cannot go ahead and do that at this point of time. But for others areas which are not containment zones, this can be pretty possible if we can take the help of SMC members or community, because they can help a lot in distributing material. So one person can print and he can distribute locally. So that is one thing which we can do.
Nikhil, thank you so much for addressing that head on as well. Thank you. It's a huge challenge access for many of us, right, that we're facing.
And I'd like to add on to Nikhil, Emma.
Please.
And this is something that I did as well. My favorite thing about a new school session was the joy of receiving those new books. And I think this year, a 0.12 micron virus has just taken away that joy from the students. And I really wanted to find a way of keeping some of that joy alive. So I actually had parent leaders, and I asked one of the parents, like, mail them. I designed a workbook for my students, which had a lot of art activities, a lot of academic content, which I'd asked my students, like, what is it that you would want to study? I designed a small workbook for my students and mailed it to one of my parent leaders and asked him that, hey, is it possible for you to get it printed? Because I saw him getting a lot of other worksheet printouts as well. So spoke to him, and he got that workbook printed out, then spoke to the local stationery shop in my community. and requested him, so raised some funds, paid him through Google Pay, and requested him to make multiple copies of that workbook, and then contacted all the parents and asked my parent leaders to just go to the stationery shop and collect the workbooks. And I was really happy because I felt like a lot of my kids wanted that feeling of a new notebook or a new book, because they'd been asking, when are we going to get new books? And I really wanted them to have something. So that is what I did. And a lot of kids in my classroom now have those workbooks, and they're working on those workbooks and now sending pictures on WhatsApp. So it just creates a lot more enthusiasm in elementary kids to have a new book, to have a new workbook. So pretty much similar to what Nikhil was telling. This is how I leverage the community around.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to pause the panel there, and I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you students, educators, for sharing your experiences so honestly through the channels of difficult internet and everything else. But thank you so much for sharing your insights. I think I'm leaving thinking a lot about how do I define learning? I'm thinking about integration and how do I bring together the learning that seems to really matter to our children with the content that we're teaching. I'm leaving thinking a lot about parents. And I'd love for all of you to just take literally the next minute to just share or to just think for yourself, what are you leaving thinking about from this panel? And just to say thank you again to all of the panelists. If you want to add any thoughts, any gratitude in the chat, please do. But thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to be here this afternoon with all of us. Okay, so in the last part of this conversation, Amalia and I are going to take a very quick summary of some of the learnings that we've heard. I think we've heard snippets of from different people sharing. We're just going to share some of our insights and learnings, some of the challenges that we're still facing, and then just open this up at the end for questions. So as we're sharing learnings, if something comes to your own mind from your own experience of I also do this, or I've been doing this and this really works, or I've seen another educator, or I've seen somebody else do this and I know it works, please add that into the chat as well, and just share what that practice is and how you've seen it work, so that we can all learn together from the things that are working. So I'm just going to start thinking a little bit about relationships. I think we heard it, I think Jyoti started so beautifully with this at the start, right? But relationships matter now more than ever. And what we've begun to understand is that it's really, really important to create space to foster connection between students, their peers, teachers, and families. And I think we heard that come out multiple times from our different panelists, both students and teachers. And the second is to think about how students, parents, teachers are working together in partnership. Now I have a very, very small clip, and this is here because it made me smile. But as you watch it, I just want you to think about how you're seeing these ideas of connection and partnership come alive in this very, very small clip. Oh no, Amalia, it's not going to work. Okay, I'll find it later for you. Okay, what this video was that was extremely cute was some elementary students who were doing little video clips to a song of Baby Shark. What was really cute in this video is, or really powerful, I should say, not cute, in this video, was that the parents were videoing the students. There were siblings who were also part of this activity. So there were very small siblings dancing along with their peers. The teacher also did a video clip of herself dancing to this video. What she did really beautifully was she cut each of her students' video clips. She put them together in a montage, and then she shared that back for all the students. I personally have experienced this as a parent with my own son, where at school they're sending out audio clips of stories for children to listen to then draw. and create storybooks from those stories that they're hearing. What the school are doing, what the teacher is doing, is she's collating those stories, those pictures, and she's creating a storybook that the children together have created. What we're seeing this really create is connection between children and parents through learning, through the activities that they're doing, but also it's really still building that sense of togetherness in the classroom. Like my son Aiden, he loves to sit and watch and to see what each child in this class has created, or to see the video clips from different children in the class. And when you put them together, it makes them feel like they're more connected than maybe they feel it every day. We're also seeing, and it's been very fascinating to see what kind of activities or what kind of opportunities have enabled the highest student engagement. And so, for example, we're seeing that theatre workshops held on Sundays, 35 out of 35 kids are on Zoom as part of that theatre workshop. Informal Sunday chat with my friends and the teacher, everybody's there. And so children are telling us they need this connection. Are we creating that space for them? Are we thinking about ways, both using technology or like really low tech in terms of video, WhatsApp? How are we making that connection? The second are learning activities that create moments of care and connection between children, their parents, and friends. A really beautiful activity that one of our teachers told me about was she had asked her students to find the oldest thing in their house and to find out from their family the stories behind that old thing. And so what that led to was a lot of beautiful conversations in families around the history of these artifacts and sources. And I think this was part of a grade 6 sourcing chapter, actually. It was a really beautiful activity. But what the teacher then did was that she invited the students to share those artifacts and those stories with their friends. And again, creating moments of care and connection between children, families, and friends. What we're also seeing be really powerful is shared decision making. I think both Nikhil and Manja talked about the way that they're working with parents, and one of our school teams, I think, did a really beautiful parent-teacher conference where you can see students, parents, and teachers come together, and what they came together to do was to agree how learning was going to happen. So how often was work going to be sent out? What were the expectations of kids? What were the expectations of parents? What were the expectations of teachers? How would this class community support children who didn't have access to technology be able to learn? And so families took responsibility to support another family to help their children learn. And the last thing that I think you've heard some beautiful examples from our students is just really around students helping other students to access learning. And I think we've had some beautiful examples from Jyoti around the work that she's been doing to help children really access, or students and her friends really access, arts, poetry, and we're seeing a lot of this happening where we create platforms for children to share and to teach other children, whether in their community, supporting each other, or over the phone, or through an online platform, that students are really helping others to access learning, and they're choosing learning that matters to them. We're seeing a lot of arts, a lot of creative work that students are really helping other children to access. I'm now going to pass on to Amalia, and she's going to share the second set of learnings that we wanted to share today.
Thank you, Emma. So the second thing we've learned is actually just the power and the importance of listening. And just have a very perfect example for this. We were trying to figure out like student learning at Teach for India, and we asked a staff member to record a video for us to kind of show us an example of what can engaging student learning look like. And he recorded this beautiful video with like biscuits and packets to help us with factors. And we sent it out to a lot of people. So a lot of staff members, a lot of teachers, fellows saying, what do you think of this video? Will it work? And we just got really good feedback, right? Saying that this is really strong and it'll work really well. And so we began sending it to kids. And then Emma said, can we send it to a group of students who do not know this teacher? right? And the students responded saying, Didi, this is just amazing, but Didi, I don't understand anything. And it was just so beautiful because the entire community had so much feedback to give. All of us had so much to say, but we only really learned what was working and what was not when we reached out to the students. And it was just such a simple step that we seem to be missing out. And I think just echoing what Mantra said about reaching out to students to understand what they want to learn and what's working, just really, really listening, right? To take that on and say, let's innovate based on that. Something else we're learning based on just building off on listening is just how much content do we send students on a day, on a week? And this is a challenge that we've not yet figured out, right? Like how much content is too much? How much students are seeming to get very overwhelmed when we send a lot at one time, but it's just depending on different kids. And so again, can we listen to understand how much is enough? How much is the right size for different students? And that's something we're trying to navigate through. The second is just, I heard a lot of you share, Soumya, echoing what you shared about checking for understanding. A huge challenge we're facing actually is we are not face-to-face with our students in class. It is getting difficult to check on who's understanding, who's not. But on the other side of things, we're learning that in a classroom, we have 60:1 ratios. We have 50:1 ratios. Virtually, we can actually track them individually. And there's just so much space for us never done before with checking for understand. What would it mean for us to look at responses individually, get an understanding of how each student is learning versus in that 1 hour block in the classroom, and how can we look at that as an opportunity? I think the second one is just, the third one actually is very close to our hearts, and it's just around innovation and relevance. Nikhil, I heard you share exactly that on the word innovation, and something that we're learning is just the more relevant and innovative, the more opportunities we're taking to innovate, the more success and response rate we're seeing. And an example I'd like to give to illustrate that is just when this particular activity, where students were asked to make a list, very, very beautiful. Students were asked to make a list of all the household chores that take place at home, right? And next to that chore, to write down who in the house is taking on that responsibility. They made the list, and then it was, okay, make a second list. And you like work to be divided, given that the big realization was that in most houses, the mother of the house was the one who was doing most of the work. And then the next part of the assignment was now draw this based on a comic. How is the work currently being divided? And a second comic thing, how would you like it to be divided? The drawing that you see is actually by a student. And what we saw from here is the power of building advocacy and student voice empowerment through learning at this time. And it reiterated for us what opportunities we can take at this point of time, and how we can actually do things we've never done before to build life skills and 21st century skills in our students. Yeah. Thank you, Emma. Over to you.
Okay, we're gonna ask everyone to pause to take 3-4 minutes to look back over your notes and reflections, to think about some learnings that you want to remember, maybe some practices that you want to try, and a commitment that you want to make for the upcoming school year. As we approach a school year where teaching and learning may look, that I'm sure there are going to be things that look very different. I think I saw something had written in the chat, like some of these things are the same things you would do as a teacher anyway, right? So some of the things really shift. Some of the things are going to stay the same, but you may do them differently. They may be the same thing, but the way you do them may look different. But think about what's the commitment that you make for the upcoming school year to your students or to the children that you work with. I'm thinking a lot about my own children right now, but just thinking about what's the commitment you make for the upcoming school year. And you can share any one of these in the chat box. So it might be a learning you're taking away that you want to remember. It might be a practice you want to try. It might be the commitment you want to make. And after that, we're going to open up the space for questions and answers. So we're excited to hear what all of you guys are thinking. Okay, so many things starting. I'm reading. I'm sorry, that's why I wasn't talking at all. I was so busy reading the chat box. But really interesting to hear, like, a lot of listening with students, co-creating with students, a lot of thinking about things that are relevant and relevant for children, the importance of working with parents. I think a lot of those key reflections coming through the chat box. Okay, so we're actually going to just open the space up now for some questions for the last 10, 12 minutes, and then we're just going to do a short closing. So I think, Mansi, I think you'll curate some of those questions, and then any of us, I hope it's not just me, but any of us that would like to answer, or
Absolutely.
we'll try and offer some.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for a great session. All of our participants, if you have any more questions, please type them in the chat box. Meanwhile, we'll go through a few that I already have. So Emma, one of the questions is about how we include examples of STEM in offline mode of learning. STEM would be science and math and stuff.
I think that's a great question. Does one of our teachers who teaches maths and science want to share their thoughts to start with? No, Soumya, do you want to share a little bit about your school and maybe like what you guys have been doing?
Yeah, I mean, 2-3 things come to mind. I think specifically in science, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff. We've sent out a lot of pre-work to students before they come into the class, using a lot of Arvind Gupta's resources, actually, Toys from Trash. And so students have to make it and then come into class and then share that either over, say, WhatsApp or over the Zoom call, saying what they did, and then the teacher kind of launches into the class. Same with reading case studies, reading reading articles from journals and things like that, which you would again do in class just as naturally. Some teachers have been really bold and also tried to do simulations. There's a beautiful platform called PHET, P-H-E-T. I can put the link into the chat box later, which allows you to do a ton of simulations from electricity to mechanics and stuff. And so we've, posted tasks saying, hey, I want you to play around with this and find me. As an example, one of the common ones used is find the relationship between voltage and current, right? And so they have to go punch in a whole bunch of numbers on it. And again, this is much better than in class because they all have a device, yeah? So they can all go punch in numbers. They can all take notes around that, draw a graph, and then come back and tell me, hey, you know what? V is actually proportional to I. And hey, cool, man, you just discovered Ohm's law. That's what it is. It's fantastic. And so I think that's one. In tech, I think one of the most innovative things that I've seen are an organization called the Apprentice Project has made a self-learning packet on Scratch. So you can download the MIT Scratch app and write a little bit of software on it using that, which I think has also worked out really well for some of our students in general. Yeah, so I would say these kind of 3-4 things that have worked well.
So much for sharing that, Soumya. We also have, how will you ensure that children aren't getting fatigued? There are 2-3 in the same category, which also talk about how can we help about with hours of online learning, how much screen time is the right amount of screen time, and then again the fatigue, and how do you make sure that there isn't those, how do you make sure that the screen time is the right amount, and how do you tackle fatigue?
I'm going to ask Nikhil or Mantra to share some of your thoughts on that, actually.
Sure. I think the screen's time plays an important role because these times, they just have smartphones. They don't even have laptops. So we need to keep in mind that we should be giving videos which are not 10 to 15 minutes long, because that is not one particular subject they are learning. They're learning 3 or 4 subjects in a particular day. So, and there are some health issues as well, because couple of parents told me that the kids are getting eye strains and anxiety as well by looking into videos. So I try to give 10 to 15 minutes of video. That's more than enough for one particular day for my subject, and I think that will take care of that. Yeah, and I keep videos could be context specific, but because my kids do not understand much of jargons and vocabulary, so I try to make the videos as simple as I can. And I think I research on YouTube, because YouTube is a hub of all the resources at this point of time. And I truly agree that not same content will be applicable and understandable by everyone. So keeping it simple, crisp, and to the point will make it. And I always take my kids' feedback, and they also tell me that they like these kind of channels and these kind of videos. So I'll take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well. In what ways can you keep your students motivated? There are 2, 3 in the same category. One is how do you make sure that in the online learning kids are during which time, if the video and the mic is off, how do you make sure that they are still learning? These are 2, 3 of similar category.
Samia, please share.
Does somebody else want to go before? Actually, I already spoke a couple of times.
No, please. I actually wanted to just share a little bit about elementary students, but please share first.
Sure. I don't think this is very different again than what we do in school. I would put this in one of those brackets where we'll say, you do what you do in school. So number one, you have to reiterate the big goals, man, with our students. So I'm talking to my students on a weekly basis, at least, and the beginning of every class about, and this is not like, education is not an option for us, yeah. आप अगर पढ़ाई लिखाई नहीं करोगे तो you're not going to a different life path, guys. And I don't want to pressurize saying, oh my god, 10th में number कितने आएंगे and all that stuff. But the fact is कि that learning is not an option for our students, and my students get that. But you have to reiterate that to them and to their parents. Second, I think every class has to also be started with that. I've been using this line consistently with my students. कौन कहता है कि आसमां में सुराख नहीं हो सकता, एक पत्थर तो तबीयत से उछालो यारों, which basically means यार कि try नहीं करोगे तो होगा कैसे, right? And all the stuff that you would do in class generally to get kids to work hard apply here also. I think third is just that content, right? If the content is relevant, if the content is rigorous, it works, man. They want to do it. It's not a question of तुमको कुछ फोर्स करना पड़ रहा है, मोटिवेट करना पड़ रहा है, वगैरह वगैरह, right? The fact is that any good teacher sets up ambitious goals and sets up a great way to give project and then gives feedback on it consistently, right? Which actually you can do better now. So if you can do that, student motivation stays tremendously high, right? As long as you can consistently give that feedback and hold that goal and celebrate it. So just putting together this kind of poem book and sharing it out, got them really pumped up, yeah, कि हाँ एक हफ्ते में हमने poem book लिखा है, next week speech लिखना है अपने को. So I feel like all of the things that you do in class to keep students pumped and motivated just translate just as well into the virtual world. You need systems and structures to check, right? कि काम क्या हो रहा है, not to check like inspect and audit, but more in the spirit of giving feedback. उसके बिना तो कोई भी काम नहीं करता है, right? Like if nobody is seeing what you're doing, nobody is working, man. So I feel like you need to keep that going.
I love that Alia is busy writing in the chat and she's remembering all the things that you've done in class with us. I love that.
Thank you for the response, guys.
I was just going to answer Mansi. I was just going to share, like, I think what Samia said about just making the learning visible. And I feel like that's really key. So like for like even with small kids, like what we've seen is when children are asked to share a selfie with their work back, like the engagement of elementary students in sharing their work back with their teacher is so high. And when they're being asked to when there's some celebration and recognition of what they've done, their engagement is increasingly high. So I think just how do we make flow learning visible and visible like to all? I think that's the kind of principle I would think about a lot in terms of motivation.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Another question is, are there any online resources for activities in integrated humanities?
I mean, there's so many. I don't have them at the tips of my fingers to just list them off, but we can definitely get them shared out with afterwards. But there are so many around sustainable development goals. A lot of online resources for history, for geography, for social political life, everything. There's so many.
Thank you.
Stanford University.
Keep home learning simple.
Sorry, say the question again.
It says, how can you keep home learning simple?
I mean, again, I think for me, I'd start with, are my kids finding it simple? Like I think if they're finding it simple, then it's simple enough. And if they're not finding it simple and it seems complicated to them, then somewhere it needs to be simplified. So then I would need to understand from them: is it the pacing that's too difficult? Is it too much? Is the work too complex? Like when we sent that video out to students in our classrooms, and they came back and said that the language is really difficult. We're not used to this. Like what we realized is like some of the things that we thought were simple were not simple, right? So we asked our students. So I think that's the first start. And I think like just depending on what questions I ask, I would be able to understand what needs to shift to make it more simple for my students to do it.
I'll also like to answer this question. So what makes it simple, online teaching simple is just don't focus on completing work or mastery, just focus on participation. Make sure the kids are participating and having fun, and just teach some new skill perhaps, or revise the old portions. Just get them into, hooked into this whole new thing that all of us are facing. Right? It's completely new. Most of us did not even know how to use a lot of the new technologies ourselves, right? So for the kids, it must be even more difficult. So I think just keep it simple. Just make sure you have fun, revise old content, get them hooked into this whole new thing.
Yeah. I just add for the teacher as well, like for it to feel simple for the teacher. I think there is some upskilling that has to happen for all of us, right? Like there's lots of new platforms to navigate for teachers. Like I don't use a lot of these myself personally, so like learning to use these for my work would be something I would need to upskill myself in. And I think what we've seen really work is like teacher teams, like bringing teachers together to navigate that together, rather than everybody sitting in their own homes by themselves feeling like I don't know how to do this. Just bringing people together and really leveraging people's, like some people in the group will feel more comfortable with one thing, somebody will feel more comfortable with the other, and just how do we bring teacher teams together to enable them to navigate some of these challenges.
It makes sense. It's amazing how in principle all the solutions are actually similar. That's how you would solve problems in schools as well, right? There's another one that says, please suggest a caution about YouTube resources. So not so many creative common videos are available. I'm guessing they're asking how do you make sure there's enough caution on the online activity of children?
I mean, anything I would share with my children, I would go through myself first. And I think that's one. I think the second is how do we teach our children to navigate that online world, right? Like we're going to have to, like as our students are spending time, but this is true before lockdown and after lockdown, right? The students are navigating the internet. Even my 4-year-old knows how to use YouTube, right? Like he knows that, like, I have to put parental controls in place to take care of like taking like the way he might navigate that online space. No, so I would think the same with anything that we share with our students, we should know. But also, like, as educators, are we educated in online safety, and are we educating our children on how to be safe, and their parents on how to be safe online?
Absolutely. There, how do you measure student performance when teaching online?
I'm going to let Soumya take that one, because I think he's been doing a lot of that work. I think I teach. I think big thing I've been thinking about is just student samples. Like, how do we take, especially for elementary school, like how do we take samples of student work? And I actually think the opportunity to spend more time looking at samples of student work is like significant with this. I think just scanning through student work and understanding, like, what are my students understanding, what are they not understanding, and then how do I use that information as a teacher is, I think, really, really powerful. But I'll let Soumya maybe give some more concrete examples of what he and his team have been doing at iTeach.
No, I think that's exactly it, Emma. I think so. If you go back and think about what has changed, the way the teacher looks at student work and the way the teacher gives feedback. These are the two basic things that we've hit a brick wall in because of not being able to be in the same physical space. And you have to adapt these to the virtual world. Now, in our case, again, using Google Classroom has allowed us to look at a ton of student work. We can do MCQs, which they respond back with and self-grade. 2 subjective answers. I sent a picture earlier. Also, like, really long subjective answers to the poems that they sent, which was all typed up by them, 7 stanza poems, right? And that's helping me look at their work, grade, tweak, give them feedback, and all of that. And that's the way we're doing it. But basically, exactly what you said. Yeah, you're going to have to set up a system to collect student work, which tells you how students are doing. And so I know of some people, some teachers who also. So movement is starting to slowly get allowed, right? And so they're setting up systems where the students have to go drop off work into a drop box, and the teacher is going to collect it and then look at it and then, tweak and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really it.
May I add here? I think something that's really working in addition is just figuring out what medium is working, right? There may be some students who may get overwhelmed when feedback is sent written, but on call, it's a lot easier, and then it helps them participate the next day. So I think it's also a matter of, in the classroom, figuring out what works better for who. There may be a set of kids who it may be helpful just sending the same, like an answer key to them or holding them accountable for each other. But I may know that I have a set of students who may not go well with that, actually may feel demotivated. So I think here it depends on how well do I know them, or how well do I need to understand what they need at this point of time, and then follow up with them accordingly. It has been useful to follow up when students are not responding over a couple of days, to actually give them a call and say, should we do one-on-one feedback? Because more often than not, it's just because they're unsure of what to say, or they're not confident enough about their answers. So yeah, identifying that is really important. Just see what works for you and your kids is the most important. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We now have a question from our Facebook Live, which is there any life skill learning plans which we can conduct online?
Good question. I mean, I'm sure there are. I think, like, one is, like, there's a lot that people would have used in the classroom. How do you adapt them for online? I'm sure they exist. I mean, we can just look. I don't have them. I don't know at my fingertips, like, but I'm very confident that they would exist.
There's a lovely platform called Skill Builder Framework. I would just Google that. It breaks life skills into 8 essential skills. Each skill has, I think, 15 steps towards mastery. And each level then has a bunch of activities which they've adapted to online, which they've adopted to virtual world recently as well. Yeah, Ashwath has just shared the link. We found that to be super useful.
Thanks.
There's a great resource for elementary children. It's a scholastic book called First Aid for Feelings and really works on building emotional intelligence skills at this time. So I think that would be really useful.
Thank you. Thank you for all of this, guys. We will now close the question and answer section of the webinar. Thank you so much, all of you who've helped answer all of this. Emma, I think you have a closing.
I just want to leave everyone with this question. It's like, what do you want teaching and learning, or learning actually, to look and feel like in 2020? And as we move ahead, like, I think the shift of, I keep hearing people talk about it should go back to normal, and moving that idea to, like, what do we want to create? What do we want teaching and learning to look like? What is the education we want, or our children want? They're telling us they want. What is the education that we can create as we move ahead? And how do we use this opportunity to improve and strengthen the way that learning happens for children? And how do we really shift some of these? I think the biggest shift I've just heard is just this really big focus on our children, what our children want to learn, how our children are learning, gathering feedback from our children, understanding how we can really make learning for our children. And I think as we move into 2020, move forward in 2020, how do we stop thinking about how do we go back to what was and start thinking about what we want to create as we move ahead? And so I just want to leave you with this question. What is it that you want learning to look and feel like in 2020? People can add in the chat if you'd like, but I just leave you with that question. And thank you so much, both to our panelists, for everything that you shared today, and also to all of you for the questions, and for staying with us and listening to some of the learnings and reflections that we've shared with you. So thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. While our participants type their response to your question, we would like to thank you, Emma and Amalia, and the wonderful panel for being generous with your time and expertise today. I request the speakers also to quickly share their thoughts on the webinar today.
You want me to share? I mean, I just shared. I think what I found really powerful was just hearing from students and educators together. I've been thinking about the triad of students, educators, and parents together, and how do we bring everybody together into the same room to just really understand, like, what is it we want to learn? What is it that we each want, and how do we create an education that is what we really want? And I think today it was just really beautiful for me to hear students and educators together, and just, I learned so much. I've filled my notebook with things that people were saying. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you. Thank you all of you, for all the panelists, all the speakers, for being here. And thank you for all the participants for being great today. Our next webinar is scheduled to take place on June 5th on Ticklinks, a learning revolution led by teachers. So do look forward for Firki emails in your inbox. Before you leave, please take a 2-minute survey to give us feedback on your learning experience on this webinar today. This helps us grow and improve our resources for you. To reach out to our speakers after the webinar, write to them on emmafrancis@teachforindia.org and Amalia Jashnani @teachforindia.org. This information is pasted shortly in our chat windows. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.